Hi there, my name is Devon. So I had already recorded several videos on this game, and I was pretty heavy in my critique. Monster Freaks is a very, very simple action game. It feels like I'm just looking for stuff. It feels almost like a hidden object game. That all kind of went out the window just about 30 minutes ago. I believe this game is meant to be a survival game, and that's very different than an action game. As soon as I played it again with a different type of mindset, the game opened up and it became a lot more fun. So this game was called Monster Freaks, and it was developed by Corporate Filth. This was the only thing he wanted me to know before going in. I played it the way that I thought it was meant to be played, based on the information that was given to me from the game. So it seems like the goal of the game is to kill as many monsters as possible. But there's another goal, and that goal is to find the exit. I was thinking that the combat was really stale. It was really simplistic. If you think about games that were like survival horror games, if you think about Resident Evil or Silent Hill, those games are not action games. Now, they do have action in them and you can shoot in them, but the game isn't about that kind of thing. It's not about that mechanic. Games that are about the action tend to focus on that thing, like Doom, for example. They give the player reason to go over to enemies and engage with the enemy. They do that by having health drops or ammunition drops, or somehow give the player a whole lot more reward for doing the thing that they want them to do. That's called the core game loop. And if you think about it, if you think about playing like Resident Evil 4, for example, and playing that game and thinking about it as an action game, and you go into it thinking, I have to kill all of these zombies, that's not going to feel good, right? Those games would be really difficult for that reason. And it would not just difficult, but it would feel bad. You know, it wouldn't feel like that's a fun game. Now, the reason why those games are not thought of as action games, the experience of survival horror is built into the structure of the game. In terms of contextualization. When we talk about context for games, what we're talking about is win states, lose states, and the core game loop. So a win state, for example, is what you are trying to get the player to accomplish, right? Their goal when going into the game. So Errant Signal did a wonderful video on this. There's a link in the description. What he was basically saying was that every time that you give the player a win state, it can contextualize their gameplay, meaning that you tell them, for example, in Monster Freaks, if you tell them that there are 70 monsters left to kill, then that contextualizes the gameplay. That makes the person go, there's 70 monsters left, I should go kill those monsters. When that's not really the goal of the game, right? The goal of the game is to get to the exit, or so it seems. I don't actually know if this is your intention, so I'm just putting this out there. But what I think is happening here is that this is a game that's kind of like Left 4 Dead, where you are going from one end to the other in a map. You're trying to reach the exit, or you're trying to escape. And in between, you're trying to kill all these enemies, or you're trying to evade them. At no point during my gameplay is the game saying, hey, you need to get to the exit, you need to go this way, because that is never said. In fact, the only thing that is said is how many enemies are left. And that just makes for a very boring experience. If I think about going to the exit, and that's going to be my goal, because of that, like I said, the combat feels rather light and it's not engaging, and I'm okay with that. It doesn't need to be. The combat mechanics feel good in that kind of light, right? Where I have a goal. Players don't know the context that they have when entering a game other than the information that's given to them. And for me, when I'm playing Monster Freaks, I don't feel like there's enough information given to me to make this a survival game. It feels like with the fast-paced music, with the opening cinematic, the teenager that you're playing as, presumably, has his vengeance on his mind. You have the very first thing that the player sees when the gameplay starts is text showing you how to shoot monsters. There's monsters in front of you, and you start shooting them immediately, like with your slingshot. With all those things coming together, and with the little, counter at the top that says how many monsters are left, it really feels like you're pushing the player toward trying to engage in combat. That's certainly what I felt. It took me, 3 or 4 times playing the game, analyzing the game, sitting and recording a couple videos about this, and then thinking about my thoughts over a weekend for me to understand, this was probably not an action game. But as soon as I played it again with a different type of mindset, the game opened up and it became a lot more fun because it was recontextualized. So I think that's very, very important when it comes to the game design of this game and really of all games. I mean, so that's just what I wanted to get across there. When developers send me their game, they have these questions to answer. So we're going to read this dev's answers before we get going. So the first question was, what were you hoping the player would feel while playing your game? Their answer was nostalgia for how games used to feel before everything became too convoluted with microtransactions, early access, and hand-holding. I want the player to have fun finding things out on their own rather than having everything just handed to them. Question number 2 was, why did you choose this experience as opposed to something else? Their answer was, this is my first game, but also a love letter to the games that I loved growing up. Question number 3 was, were there any specific moments, mechanics, or ideas that you built around that emotional goal? Their answer was, I wanted the player to feel cool as the main character. I also have a ton of things in the game for the player to discover, features, environmental storytelling, and Easter eggs. So after reading those responses, you didn't talk about this game in terms of a survivor game. You didn't talk about the mechanics actually much at all, but you did talk about how this game was more retro compared to older games. And in that kind of sense, it makes me think about this game more in a action-oriented mindset, because there's not a whole lot of games that I remember that are about survival specifically. I guess Missile Command, if I were to go that far. But yeah, it makes me really curious of whether you intended this game to be a surviving game or not. I do believe you did, because the goal of the game is to get to those exits. I realize that I'm not getting rewarded like for any of my mechanics in this game. In fact, the only time that you're rewarding the player is when they go out of their way to go find something like ammo or health or another weapon of some sort. It really feels like you're pushing exploration. What I feel like I want to ask is the same thing that I talked about in my previous game design philosophy video. And that's this question that feels kind of rude at first, but bear with me. Why would anyone play your game? Or why would anyone play this game? At first, it feels like an insult. And this is something that my film professor had told me in film school. He would say, why would anyone want to watch your movie? And it's like when you hear that, you're thinking, I made something. If other people enjoy it, then they enjoy it. So what's the point of asking the question? But the question is about philosophy. And the question is about trying to communicate your intent with other people. And this is very important in game design, especially if it's a game that you want specifically to communicate a very specific experience to other people. If what you're doing is creating just a piece of art and it's just for you, then it doesn't really matter. But I don't think that's what this is. So when I say that question, when I ask you, why would anyone play your game? What I'm asking is, why would you play this game? Like, why did you make this game? Or what do you want from it? Take that experience and somehow make players understand that that's what they should get from their gameplay. If you're playing the game and you're thinking, I really like killing 6 enemies in a row, like that feels really good to me, and then you just put it out there and you hope that other people do the same thing, that's not gonna work. So you do something like, put a 6 times combo and you say, hey, you did this, that was really good. And then that gets in the player's brain of them going, oh, right. Okay, I should be doing that kind of thing, right? And so that puts them into a specific type of experience. And before you know it, after putting all these things together and designing an experience, now you have communicated the thing that you hoped other people would get from playing the game. I do appreciate the other things that you wanted to have in this game when you talked about having Easter eggs and environmental storytelling. I really like those moments. And I like environmental destruction things that you can do in here. I think those are really cool. Hitting the TV or the computer in your room, things like that. I wish there was a lot more of that, to be honest. I really like that kind of stuff. But that stuff should be bonus. I think you should really focus on that core game loop first, get that done and just solid. And then after that's done, then start adding this other stuff. Because when the player plays this and they think about all those bonus things first and the Easter eggs first, that kind of pulls their attention away from, what they should be focused on. And that can be totally fine. But, think about, like Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Korok seeds. If you were to put the player into the game and the first thing they do is collect a Korok seed and it says, all right, 399 Korok seeds to go. The player would feel different, contextualizing their gameplay that way. On top of that, the stuff that I really enjoyed, I really, really liked the sound design in here. I thought the music was a lot of fun. I liked harkening back to the 80s. At first, in the very beginning, you see the title screen and you see the bat, he slams it into a monster's head. I'm thinking, oh, this is kind of goofy. I watched the opening cinematic where he's looking at his closet with monsters coming out of his closet. And I'm like, oh, that's fun. It's kind of a goofy thing. And then you cut to the kitchen and you see immediately like the sister's like head being ripped off and their dad like being bitten in half. And I'm like, oh my God, like that's a lot of gore right there. I was thinking Pixar level storytelling here, and we're going like Stranger Things, which is totally fine. That's a fine thing to have. I just thought you should know that was my first impression with it. So thank you so much for submitting this game. I hope what I've said here was interesting in some way. If you're really interested in this kind of thing where we analyze games from the ground up, you can go into the Discord. We have a Discord, link in the description. Check it out. I'm there. A bunch of other game developers are there. It's a lot of fun. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you guys later.